Hello, this is Zahirul Alam. Welcome you all on Frankly Speaking. My guest today is Donal Brown, Associate Vice President of International Fund for Agricultural Development, who is responsible for developing and managing programs and operations. Mr. Donal Brown previously worked at the DFID, that is United Kingdom's Department for International Development, in a number of senior positions, and he also worked in Bangladesh. We are welcoming Mr. Donal Brown on Frankly Speaking. Welcome,
Thank you.
sir.
I'm very happy to be here and be back in Bangladesh.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure having you on Frankly Speaking. First of all, let's begin with your visiting objectives and goals for which you are currently visiting Bangladesh. Please shed some light on that.
So the main reason I'm here is to commemorate the 45 years of partnership that IFAD has had with the country of Bangladesh. I mean, we've been working here since 1978. We've had 37 projects. We've had an investment of nearly $2 billion over that period. And so I've come here. We had a commemoration yesterday with the government, but also as head of operations, global operations, Bangladesh is one of our biggest portfolios. So I've come to review the portfolio, see some of our work. But frankly speaking, as you said, I've lived here before. I think if you've ever lived in Bangladesh, it touches your heart. So I always try and find a reason to come back to see how things are going in Bangladesh.
I mentioned that you worked for DFID and you also worked in Bangladesh from 1998 to 2002. So you have extensive experience with Bangladesh. So let's have some insight about the IFAD's program and how does IFAD support and contribute for the development of rural community, rural economy. Please give some insight about that.
So IFAD's mission is to work with the poorest in rural communities. We say we reach the last mile, so the very end of the road. Okay. And obviously in Bangladesh, you have a big rural population. We work with the poorest. You have made incredible progress in Bangladesh, but you still have a lot of poor people. You still have a lot of extreme poor people. So IFAD supports the government to try and target and address the poorest people in rural areas in Bangladesh. We have a focus on agriculture, but not just on agriculture. We look at rural development, rural communities. So we have an approach to looking at rural livelihoods. Okay. And it's very pertinent to a country like Bangladesh. What we also hope to offer is we have programs in over 100 countries around the world. So we try and bring our global experience to the countries we work in and take lessons from one country and bring it to another country. But equally in a country like Bangladesh, you've got incredible experience in rural development yourselves and taking some of the lessons from there and sharing them elsewhere.
In this current visit, I heard that you have visited some IFAD finance programs. Could you please share some experience that with your interaction about the farmers or the rural people on which you are working, and does it impact significantly for their economic and overall social development?
So I'm very proud that IFAD, as you rightly said, IFAD supported projects. I always say to people, they're not IFAD projects, they're government projects. Okay. You know, we support government to achieve their own development objectives. So we work through government. So our partners are government. This time I was up in the north, I was in Kurigram, I was in Rangpur, I was up in Gaibandha, up in that area, visiting some of the IFAD supported programs there. One was a big program with LGED, the local government engineering department, a really successful program looking at how do you improve the resilience of rural communities. So we were doing, I mean, as we know, Bangladesh is one of the countries most affected by climate change. And the most vulnerable people are the poor rural people. So, you know, we do, working with the government, basic flood proofing of roads, infrastructure that can work through the year, road access, cyclone shelters, but also improving the markets. If you go to many parts of rural Bangladesh, you will see, not very hygienic, good markets. How do you improve those markets so they're better for the population, they attract more people?
Okay.
So, those sort of things, but also another aspect of what we've been looking at is the vocational training. Bangladesh has incredible opportunity with its youth and training them, getting jobs for rural youth. So a lot of vocational training programs to help with the rural youth. But another key aspect, we tried to look at where there are the major constraints in the rural economy, is working with organizations like PKSF on microfinance, on value chain addition in the agriculture industry. How do you unblock some of those constraints that are stopping rural people developing their livelihoods, contributing to a rural economy, getting access to markets, getting access to credit? They're the sort of things IFAD supports in Bangladesh.
So in your view, the major obstacles are getting access to finance is the major thing? Or
I think there's a number of obstacles. It depends on the area. It depends on what we call the value chain, the sector you're looking at. I think there's 2 or 3 key issues that are more generic. One is the impact of climate change. So how do you help with the adaptation in rural areas to climate change? So I've talked a bit about...
So you always focus on integration of adaptation and resilience while you are taking some projects?
We do, but we also try and focus on how do you get small, poor rural farmers and how do you integrate them into the economy so that they can earn more money, which then very often they use for their children's education or health or to improve businesses. So access is a big issue.
But how sanguine or how convinced you are that these are the measures you are taking that can ensure the climate-related risk in the rural area?
Because I think even when I was here 25 years working before, we had similar issues. For example, in coastal areas, increased salinity. How do you get improved varieties of rice that can cope with less water, that can cope with the saline? So there's a set of issues around climate change and adaptation, but there's also a set of issues about access to finance, which is not unique to Bangladesh. Poor rural farmers the world over, no one wants to give them credit. No one wants to give them loans. They see them as a big risk. And so one of their major constraints is how do they get some money to buy the improved seeds, to be able to buy the transport, to be able to get some processing equipment. So we work with a number of financial institutions, rural finance institutions like PKSF, to try and help them develop products which are much more suited to poor rural farmers. So for example, seasonal loans. Farmers, they get their cash when they harvest their crops and they can sell them. So they cannot afford to take a loan where you have to pay every month because they don't have cash every month. But you develop a seasonal loan so they give a big repayment when they sell their crop. It works for small farmers, but you have to innovate in this sector. And that's a lot of what we do, is how do we help innovate in the financial sector to make products more affordable to small farmers.
Is that something you call the financial inclusion, which is a major
very
concern?
Much so. Huh? Very much so.
So I mean, when you're taking up the financial inclusion vision or the philosophy or the actions you are taking, is that adequately or productively beneficial for the rural economy, rural people?
I think the needs are enormous. I think the work that we've done with PKSF with the government is fantastic, but Bangladesh is world renowned for its microcredit, for its financial inclusion. I mean, you are a world leader. But I think where we try and help is looking at products that innovate for small farmers, that benefit small farmers. So some of what we do is work.
When we are calling it, we are the champion in microfinance, access to credit or finance. Is there any loopholes you see that which can be addressed, or it's worldwide, globally recognized or appreciated?
I think it's globally recognized and appreciated when it's looking at financial inclusion. But I think what we try and do and where we try and innovate with a country like Bangladesh is say, but within the whole financial inclusion, how do you get products that are specific to poor rural farmers, which is slightly different to general financial inclusion, and how can you innovate in that sector, and what's that look like? So some of it that IFAD does is providing cash into the system. So how do we, providing resources into microfinance institutions to lend to small farmers. Some of that is about product innovation, and some of it is about technical capacity and building that technical capacity. And it goes back to what I said earlier at the beginning, is, we can also draw on our experience from elsewhere in the world where we've developed financial products for small rural farmers that are slightly different from the straightforward microfinance and financial inclusion products.
Okay. Could you give some insight about the social inclusion? Is that identical to the financial inclusion?
You've done your homework well. IFAD, the other thing we spend a lot of time, because we work with the poorest, one of the key things is social inclusion. So we do a lot of work with the poorest, who are often the most marginalized, that are not included in mainstream programs, mainstream policies. That's where we feel we add real value. So for example, a lot of IFAD's focus is on gender. How do you get women included in the process? It's about youth, but we also work on things like disability, but also for the extreme poor. How do you get the extreme poor into more mainstream programs? So working on developing programs, projects that really target them within the context of the broader agriculture and rural development. That's what we do the world over, and specifically as our focus in Bangladesh.
Let us come to the collaboration or partnership with the government. We know that our Prime Minister visited Rome, and she attended a global summit, UN summit on food security, food systems. After visiting Prime Minister, could you give some sense that how IFAD can support Bangladesh in building a stronger food security system, or if it is there, how we can make it more stronger or more strengthened?
So it was a privilege for us to be able to host your Prime Minister in Rome in July. I was very, very lucky to be with her and to meet her and have a good discussion with her on this issue. I think, the global debate is changing from food security to food production to what a food system looks like. And obviously in the context of something like climate change, what's a sustainable food system? And it's equally important whether it's the UK or whether it's Bangladesh, because actually most of our food systems currently are not sustainable. We use, and including in places like Bangladesh, we use too many inputs that are not sustainable, inorganic fertilizer, etc. So we need to develop systems that are sustainable. You look at climate change, you look at the impact of climate change. Again, how do we adapt to make a sustainable food system? Bangladesh has got a lot to offer in that context, and I think it's also going through its own debate about what a sustainable food system looks like in the context of Bangladesh, because a sustainable food system is context specific. It's not the same in Bangladesh as it would be, say, in Kenya. So you need to have a national dialogue, a national debate. Where IFAD can help is we've been working with the government, but also other actors, the private sector, civil society in Bangladesh, to put people together to talk about what it looks like, to try and get a shared vision. So it's a shared vision which is not just the government, but it's all the actors that are important in a sustainable food system, the private sector, civil society, farmers, etc. So it's doing that. But the other thing that IFAD leads on within the food systems debate is assembling finance. And it's not only our own finance, but how do we help assemble finance for Bangladesh, whichever country. So a lot of our money is used to leverage others into the system. So IFAD will design a big program with government, and then will help assemble the finance around from other international investors and the private sector to fund that side of things. So that's, I think, the other part of our contribution is, is create the debate, get an answer, but then you have to finance.
এখন বিকাশে পাবেন দেশের প্রথম ডিজিটাল লোন।
Mr. Donal Brown, you were talking about the technology innovation. I mean, how does IFAD leverage technology innovation for the betterment and significant improvement of the rural economy and rural farmers in Bangladesh, especially?
Yeah. So as we were saying, poor rural farmers are often overlooked by many people. But actually, they also innovate, they also have technological needs. So what we try to do with our programs working with government and the private sector is looking at how you can put some innovations into some of those projects that are out there doing bigger things. So we talked a little bit about financial innovation. What are the right financial products that work in there? Some of the technological interventions, they may at one level seem obvious, but another level, they're actually really quite groundbreaking. So, for example, we worked with a number of academic institutions to do some mapping of the floods each year as they come down, particularly on the rivers. And through some very sophisticated modelling, we're able to predict when you're getting heavy rains how that will pan out in terms of floods, say up in Kurigram or somewhere. So we've developed an early warning system, which is now part of the projects and is out there, so we can actually predict what's going to happen depending on the level of rainfall and where it falls, and warn communities in advance what to expect so that they have some time to prepare for it. That's a major innovation to help people on that side of things, but also on some things like technologies. So, Bangladesh is full of small farmers. And there's a big interest in Bangladesh in improving the livestock sector, dairy, meat. But because they're small farmers, most of the technologies that are out there are really more suited to larger commercial farming. So we've been working, for example, to support small-scale silage production, so making feed for cattle that's appropriate for people that have only got 2 or 3 or 4 cows rather than 50 cows. And making that in a size which they can afford to buy in ways, practical innovations like that.
Okay, after leaving Bangladesh more than 2 decades, I mean, how much progress you have noticed or you have observed so far that Bangladesh have made?
I think Bangladesh, the Simblars, has made incredible progress, and it's not because of what. But I remember when I was here, the debate in 1999 was, we have a population of, say, 110 million. How are we going to manage to feed all these people? Where's it going to go? I come back, you've got a population of 170 million plus. You're not only feeding them, but you have a surplus. You can now export some of this food. And so it just shows the innovation, the way Bangladesh has progressed. You were worrying about 110. You're doing it for 170, and we would never have thought, if you had said then, we're going to have 170 million people, what are we going to do? And we're worrying about, that just shows you the progress.
But still in some areas, in some spheres of life, Bangladesh also struggles, also suffers. Like in many products that we are not have made very significant development, like onion. You see, sometimes we suffer with that. Green pepper, we suffer. So, I mean, yes, Bangladesh has made significant improvements, but still a lot of challenges ahead. So, I mean, like IFAD and other international organizations, so what is in your view that, what kind of more support Bangladesh needs to confront all those circumstantial challenges in the coming days?
So, I keep coming back to it. Climate change is one. Climate change is big and real in Bangladesh.
It also requires a huge amount of money to confront the climatic consequences.
I don't think any country in the world is prepared for climate change.
Okay.
Some countries have the luxury that it's happening more slowly than a place like Bangladesh. Most of the financing going to climate change is going to mitigation, not to adaptation.
Okay.
The important issue in Bangladesh is adaptation, because farmers need to adapt now, your food system needs to adapt now. So, we are working to try and help Bangladesh get more climate finance, particularly for adaptation. So there's a big challenge still there. I mean, it's probably even bigger. I think 20 years ago we thought about climate change, but it's happening far quicker than we ever thought. So there's that side of it. Bangladesh is still getting quite rapidly a middle class. The middle class has more sophisticated tastes. The middle class wants different sorts of food. It's not they want different sorts of nutrition. For example, you see in any country in the world, as they develop and you get a bigger middle class, they want dairy, they want meat, that all has to, be developed. Many of the systems in place in Bangladesh are still quite basic. And so we now need to develop those systems. Let me give you an example. Meat certification systems, product certification systems. You're producing a lot more vegetables, you're producing a lot, but you need to ensure that we've got the systems in place to look at the pesticides, to look at the other things, to look at the quality of the food in place. That's, a lot of the challenges, because also for Bangladesh, who is, your real X factor in Bangladesh is your human capital. This is one of the most innovative countries in the world. The people are your real resource here. And if you want to, for example...
But people, human resource with no adequate knowledge.
More needs to be done in that area, but there's a natural innovative creativity in the people in Bangladesh. You have to survive in this country because it's so heavily populated.
And still we have profound dependence on imports, especially on the food items.
And that's what I'm saying. And this is the issue. This is your challenge now, is getting the systems in place, not only to be able to satisfy the domestic market, but you'll never be able to really export unless you've got the systems in place and the certification that will allow you to export and realize the export potential that you have in that sector. Phytosanitary regulations. I mean, most countries in the world that want to export now have to be able to trace the food to the farm of origin. So if there's an issue, they know where it's coming from. This is all the sort of things we're trying to help with that. We've got a new program with the government, a sector-wide program with the government. It's about a $1.3 billion program. Ourselves, the World Bank and government funding this one, which is looking, among other things, to put in place a national system of laboratories to help with testing, to help with some of these issues. As I say, you've gone from a world where food was in short supply in Bangladesh to where you can feed your population and you have a surplus. Now you have to be able to go to that next level of improving the quality, improving the certification.
Do you think the current global order or the crisis in Ukraine could jeopardize, could endanger the future food security and other related challenges for Bangladesh?
No, I don't think so. I think because Bangladesh is self-sufficient. I think what the crisis in the Ukraine showed us was the fragility, and COVID was similar, the fragility of global supply chains of food. Countries that have national food security as a core priority, as Bangladesh always has done, has been able to at least provide the basic food for your population. I think so. You're relatively well off in that context, and I think in some ways it's an opportunity. What came through from COVID, and the thing is the importance of local markets and the importance of regional markets. We placed too much emphasis in the past on global markets. How do you export into the region, and how do you make best use of your local markets? And in that context, with a population of 170 million, you've got massive room for expansion just domestically before you worry about export.
So innovation and leverage technologies must
very much
tackling the challenges, future challenges. The final, let us get some sense about the future. Your vision and the commitments IFAD has got for the developing nations like Bangladesh. What are the future commitments for you?
So what I would like to do, if I didn't get older, was I've just come here to commemorate the 45 years of our partnership with Bangladesh. I'd like to come back for the 90 years of partnership with Bangladesh.
That's great.
I suspect by that stage I will definitely be retired and probably dead, but I think we've got a long-term partnership and vision with Bangladesh. We want to go with you for the next part of the journey in Bangladesh, which means we won't be doing the same things we've done before. I think much of this, the government has capacity now. but it's again, how do we innovate? How do we look at the next level of projects that bring in the new technologies, that bring in the creativity to work with the government, you know? Because you can do much of it yourself now, but you now need to move on to the next stage, and we want to support you in that journey. And as I said at the beginning, IFAD's particular focus is poor rural people. So how do we ensure in a country like Bangladesh real inclusion, which I know your Prime Minister, I know your government's very concerned about. It's not just about the development you see in Dhaka and the big cities, it's how do you link that to the rural
The
economy.
transformative changes of rural economy, rural farmers are remarkable.
Totally. And you know, in a country like Bangladesh, you have a very strong rural-urban linkage. No place in Bangladesh is very far away from quite a big secondary city or town. So you have ready-made markets everywhere in Bangladesh. How do you harness and strengthen those links between rural and urban areas?
Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank
Donal
you.
Brown, for joining and sharing your views. Dear viewers, that's all my conversation with Mr. Donal Brown, Associate Vice President of IFAD, currently visiting Bangladesh, and he shed light about the progress which he has experienced and witnessed in Bangladesh, and applauded the progress, and also extended his views about the programs and the operations IFAD and supporting in many programs for developing and impacting the lives in rural economy, rural farmers with their supporting programs. We thank you indeed for watching this program. We invite you to watch our next episode. Until then, to take care and goodbye.
এখন বিকাশ অ্যাপেই পাবেন দেশের প্রথম ডিজিটাল লোন।